Finally, before we go to the Q&A, just kind of the battleground and some lessons learned. This actually, for some of the pre-submitted questions, this will answer some of them. But the first thing I would encourage you to do is to thoroughly review your vertical. What I mean by that is, within the industry that your business is in, look at the industry as a whole, and then look at your specific subset as a whole. Give yourself the kind of rationale litmus test of, does this make sense? Strip out the pride and sometimes the blinders that having created something on your own can force. If you strip those out and you ask yourself, as objective as possible, does this make sense? Sometimes that's the best question you can ask yourself, and if you have a good idea, it will. But knowing what's around you, knowing exactly where you stand, and thinking about, back to what I said earlier about finding the gap, make sure you know what gap you fill. And while it sounds a little bit silly, know your mission statement inside and out. Any big investor we've ever met with, one of the first things they'll say, or they'll surprise you with it midway through an investor pitch, they say, recite your mission statement. And the surest way to show them you don't fully believe in your mission statement is by not knowing it. Secondly, is there a real need for your product? Just if the answer is no, it doesn't mean you're onto a bad idea, but jumping down for a second, if no, then ask yourself, are you capable of convincing your customer otherwise? For example, one of my favorite websites, fab.com. If you're not familiar with it, check it out. It's similar interface to Gilt or to Rue La La, but it somehow manages to convince you need all these crazy, cool, unique things that really you don't need. But you feel cool while shopping on it. You feel exclusive. Instagram. Do you really need to share your picture and life, your pictures or your life and pictures with other people? No, but they've managed to convince you that this is the next social market that you need to be part of. Evernote. Do you need to take notes on every single one of the restaurants or places you go to? Not necessarily, but they provided you a platform that makes it easy to aggregate your information. If the answer is yes, do you answer the need, and can you get in front of your customer? For example, Alton Lane or Dollar Shave Club. Our need was that we answered, do people need better fitted clothes? Yes. Do people need better fitted clothes, better quality, more affordably? Yes. And then so can we get in front of our customer? We didn't know the answer to that, and that's why we utilize PR experts. For Dollar Shave Club, if you're a guy, you need to shave, unless you have a beard, you need to shave every day. And they've managed to figure out how to get in front of their customer in a very real way, in a very viral way. Build that bridge, know your gap. What I mean by this is, one of the theories that we've really pushed at Alton Lane is that when you as a customer purchase a product from any business, you either consciously or subconsciously are creating a gap between you and the business until you have the time to verify that the time you spent and the money you used to purchase that product were worth it. So, for example, if you go to Ben & Jerry's or you go to Starbucks and you buy a caramel macchiato, you spend $5, you have it, it's a cold morning, you love it, you know immediately it was worth it. So the gap at Starbucks is very, very small. For our business, our gap is very, very wide. Why? Well, one, you're giving us a lot of money up front. Two, you're not getting your suit or shirt for anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks. So you go a long period of time before being able to verify that it was worth your time and money. And sometimes you may need an alteration or two, and so that goes another week or two. So by kind of forging this theory, what we understand is that gap, by knowing that gap, we call it the wait at Alton Lane while you're waiting to fulfill your order. That's the most important time for us to create as many touch points as possible. And when there's a ravine or a gap between you and where you're going, it'd be great if there were 50 bridges that you could go across, but all you really need is one. And what we believe in is in that first time you meet the customer, whether it's online or it's in person, use either the technology online, the user experience online, or the user experience in person to create that very first bridge, so that when that 3 to 5 weeks passes, you have a bridge to get back to that customer. Now, over time, as he comes back and purchases more, as he looks at more product, as you expand your product base, and now he's buying all of his casual clothes from us as well, we've now created many more bridges to fill that gap, so that if something does go wrong in the future, instead of having just one bridge to him, we have 50, and it's not that big of a deal. I think this is really universal across any industry, and by preaching self-awareness, meaning no matter your product, your customer should never be aware of one of your problems or one of your opportunities for improvement before you are, and that should be a gold standard for you as you think about starting your own e-commerce business or any commerce business. Finally, developers and programmers, where do I start? This is an impossibly difficult, murky jungle to navigate. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't even have any idea where to look for them. And the biggest lesson I can give here, and I'll touch more on it in a moment with some of these questions, but one of the biggest lessons I can give is if you want to start an e-commerce business, or you're in the process of starting one, and you yourself do not have a technical background in programming, do whatever it takes to find someone that you can rely on to be a guide for you. Use e-visors. Find people within e-visors that this is what they do. There are plenty of people. Use friends. You need someone to help you navigate these waters if you are incapable of doing it on your own. And hey, that's okay. I have no background in programming. We are trying to build a multi-$100 million e-commerce business, and I don't have a background in it. But we've surrounded ourselves with people that do and that can help us. I wish we had done this day one. We waited 2 years to do this, and it was 2 years too late. Or it was not too late, but it was 2 years later than it should have been. So if you have any more questions about that, please feel free to submit them. I am just very grateful for your time, and I will turn it back over to Caitlin before we get to questions, and then if you have any other questions for me or want to follow up, please do. Here's my contact info.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Peyton. That was super interesting about hearing about how kind of you built up Alton Lane and all of those lessons learned. I think will be very helpful for any aspiring entrepreneurs who are listening in. So with that, we do have plenty of your pre-submitted questions, so we'll begin with the Q&A. So the first question we have, a lot of people obviously have their idea kind of brewing, but what is the single most important question that you got to ask yourself before you actually jump in and kind of get started?
It's a really good question that's not easily answered because it can be so different depending on product type. But I think there are two that you have to ask yourself. One, I sort of already hit on, but do you know what the need for your product is? And if there is a real need, can you fill it? And if there's not a real need, can you convince your customer that he needs it? And then secondly, do you have what it takes to weather the storm? I think that there is if every entrepreneur knew what they didn't know before they started their business, I don't think there'd be too many entrepreneurs among us, me included. But you do need to make sure that you ask yourself that question and that you're able to answer that you're willing to adapt, you're willing to be flexible, you're willing to be patient, and you're willing to do whatever it takes.